Welcome back to the Valuation Ultimate Podcast. I'm Trevor Monahan. I'm a forensic accountant and business valuation specialist and the CEO and founder of the Valuation Ultimate software. This is a special episode. We're interviewing Rod Burkert. He's been an expert valuer since the late 80s. He's grown his own practices. He travelled around the US for 12 years straight in an RV, working remotely in the last decade or so. He's been coaching other valuers to improve their valuation firms, not the technical side, but generating leads, doing better kind of work, fixing up their pricing, that kind of stuff. So I thought this would be a great episode. We've had a lot of technical episodes already, so this is a bit softer, a little bit more of the soft skills side of things where you can work on your practice instead of in your practice, I guess. So we're going to go down deep into the kind of things Rod will do with his clients to basically shake them up a little bit and grow a bit better of a business valuation firm, the firm that they want. So let's get into it. And if you're just listening to the audio, we've also done a YouTube video of this episode as well, so go check it out on our website. So welcome back to the Valuation Ultimate Podcast. Today I've got a very special guest, Rod Burkert from the US. So for all our US listeners, someone that speaks your language in your dialect, and for our Australian listeners and other listeners around the world, someone that you can listen to. And the thing is, we're all used to listening to US accents anyway. It doesn't sound silly. It only sounds silly when a US person listens to an Australian person talk. I really need to slow down sometimes. So this isn't about me, this is about Rod. So I want to introduce Rod. We'll put his bio in the show notes, so you'll have all that detail there. But Rod, who are you? Why are you here? What can we learn from you as someone that's done valuations and helps valuers? What have we got to learn from you?
Well, thanks for having me, Trevor, first of all. And to everyone out there, the short story is I am, or sort of was, a BV practitioner, business valuation practitioner, like I'm imagining all of you listeners. I think in one way, shape, or form, I've been doing business valuations since the mid-1980s, starting with a regional bank where we were doing mostly business valuations for mergers and business combinations, the kind of companies that banks used to buy back in the merger mania days of the 1980s. But in 1995, that's when I first started doing business valuations the way that we would think of doing them today, with detailed reports and professional standards and following Revenue Ruling 5960. And I started working as a manager and then a partner in an accounting firm, in a CPA firm, doing business valuations. And I launched as a solo practitioner in July of 2000. And I think the one thing that I think is fun, that makes me unique, is that my wife, who later joined me in my valuation practice, we traveled for 12 years, not 12 months, not 12 days, for 12 years. From 2010 to 2022, we lived, worked, and traveled full time in an RV, traveling throughout the United States and Canada, while I still maintained a very successful and profitable business valuation practice.
Fantastic. So what made you, because you're now more of a coach than a valuer, you're not doing a lot of actual valuations. What was that transition like? What led you to thinking this is time for that kind of transition, and what made you think you had something to offer? Because we're all egomaniacs as valuers. We have to think we know stuff. We have to put up the face to the lawyers and pretend we know stuff. But what made you actually think, you know what, I've actually learned things that others can learn from me, and not just, self-reflecting, that it's not just your own ego saying that. What were the indicators? What was the proof? What gave you the confidence to make that step? Or what did you hate about doing valuations and made you make a step?
I'm glad you added that last part, because that's where I'm going to start. What I hated, what I didn't like. So from 1995 through probably 2015, I was an active BV practitioner. And Trevor, it just got to the point where personally, I wasn't getting any satisfaction out of doing that work anymore. I mean, I think, 20 years is a long time to be in any career, whether you love it or not. But I just felt like I was constantly getting pushed. Your discount rate's not low enough. Your discount, is too high. Isn't there a way that you can do this so that my client gets more of the marital estate? And I just felt like I was being pushed around and bullied by the gatekeepers, the attorneys primarily, that I used to rely on to give me the work. So that's number one, Trevor. And number two was, in our profession, you go to conferences and there's this incredible body of knowledge that tells you how to do the work, but nobody wants to talk about how they get the work. And so what I was seeing was some incredibly technically proficient appraisers who couldn't land a new client to save their life. And so, I felt like it was a natural pivot to go from doing business valuations to help other people getting that valuation work. And so that's why I transitioned into coaching. And it was one of those things, sort of like started as a side hustle, which wasn't even a phrase back when I did this. But today that's, it's all about a side hustle. So I created this side hustle coaching that I did right alongside of my business valuation practice. And as the side hustle grew, as I could replace all of the income from my, from the BV work, I just transitioned into coaching full time. And, probably since 2018, 2017, I have been a full-time business valuation coach. And as far as I know, Trevor, I believe in specialization. I am the only coach that I am aware of that caters only to BVFLS practitioners.
Okay. So let me just get a sense then for your kind of, because what I'm wondering, and the issue, it's not just an Australian thing, I'm sure it's also US things. People are very guarded because we're particularly the people that are on the circuit of the court work where you don't, you might be doing reports for a mediation or something that might end up in court, or you might be doing a report is for court. You're always guarded because you don't want to give too much away to the opposition. You don't know who's going to be the opposition. You might be friendly with someone on one case and then their opposition in the next case. What kind of personality do you think makes sort of someone that would be open to coaching? Because I would look at it, and a lot of people I talk to, and I mentor a lot of other valuers as well, they're very guarded about taking on feedback. Even like most of my work is honestly saying, look, your report doesn't comply with the national valuation standards. And that's like those stages of grief where there's the denial and the anger and eventually, well, we sit there together and do a Zoom and we say, well, no, let's look at the standards together. See how the standard says that, and your report says the opposite. I'm not just making this stuff up to belittle you. And again, some people you just don't hear from them again because no, I don't believe in your philosophy. And I'm like, well, it's not my philosophy anyway. And some people come around and they say, actually, you know what? I'll probably be doing it wrong or slightly off for 20 years. I need to change. But they're two very different kind of personalities. And like I said, we all have some level of, I wouldn't call it ego, but confidence, self-confidence to be able to do the work. Particularly, a lot of our listeners are the type of valuers that do court work, so you've got to have some confidence.
Sure.
And so what kind of personalities, and also just as part of that, CPA valuers versus valuers who have grown from scratch, not through a CPA route, people that have come through a business analyst, in a valuation firm, not a CPA just trying their hand at valuations. Is that a different mix as well? How does that fit in?
Okay, so I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. I'll start with, I want you and everyone else to know that I don't actually coach people on how to do business valuations. So you're not going to engage me as a coach to, critique your valuation work in any way, shape, or form. I'm primarily focused on practice management issues. I divide my coaching into three different pieces: marketing, creating awareness of who you are, of what you do and who you are; selling, converting, interested prospects into paying clients; and then delivery. And particularly, how can we move our business model from one-to-one client service to a more leveraged one-to-many? So within that, my coaching triangle, if you will, there is no room to talk about doing business valuations. It's really meant to be all about how, my tagline is how to turn the practice you have into the practice you want, And generally, people aren't thinking, I want more work. I want more clients. They want better work. They want better clients. And how do I go about doing that? As far as the openness, I think one problem that we have that I've observed for a long time, Trevor, is we seem to come from this scarcity mindset. Like, Trevor, if I help you, if we work together and I help you get a client, that means one less client for me. That means you win at my expense. And yet there's so much evidence out there, Trevor, that there is so much valuation work to do that none of us could possibly do all of the work, or even our minuscule share of all of the work that is out there to do. But even with that evidence, not being said, I have found, I've coached in a group context and in a one-on-one individual context, and man, people are really reluctant to share in a group setting. And I have some theories about that. It's like, oh, hey, Trevor, I've been telling you I'm busy. Oh my God, I'm so busy. I don't know what to do. I made a crap ton of money last year. But if we get into a group setting, all of a sudden, I might find out that you're not as busy as you say you are, because you're trying to be open and honest so that you can receive the coaching. And I just don't think people want to talk about how their practices are really doing. And so that's why most of my coaching happens in a one-to-one environment. We come together 3 or 4 times during the year to do group events. But again, I will tell you that those group events, the people are still pretty guarded. And I've had some coaching clients for my longest coaching client has been with me for over 5 years. And we're at August 28th here in the United States. I've got 2 brand new coaching clients starting with me on September 1st. So it runs that gamut.
So what about the dichotomy of the CPAs versus the valuation first kind of upbringings? Do you find a difference in mentality, and not so much in that, let's not go out the skills of actual valuations, but in do you find that, because CPAs, I'm a chartered accountant, which is equivalent of a CPA in Australia. We have CPAs, but they're not the same as your CPAs. It's just another organization. And we have been getting coached by the likes of Alan Weiss. I don't know if you must have heard of Alan Weiss, the $1 Million Consulting. Mm-hmm. So all those kind of theories, accountants, particularly in Australia, we've been living that stuff for 15 to 20 years in terms of value pricing and making sure we're upselling services and just offering them to see who says no rather than pre-guessing who'd say yes or no. 3 options with quotes, different scales of pricing. We've done all that stuff. So I've found that CPAs, accountants, have a more willingness to do the marketing side of things and do that exploration. Okay, what if we did try to market, do some AdWords, do some do some seminars, that kind of stuff. Do you think, in your experience, the CPAs and other kind of valuers, have they got a different mindset in regards to the marketing and selling?
So if I understand what you're saying, my experience might be just a tad different, and there's additional aspect that I want to bring in. Number one, I generally find that the dogma that we had as CPAs carries over into the business valuation profession. So of course I need to track time. Of course I need to charge by the hour. Of course I do one-to-one client service. That's the way that we've always done it. What do you mean I should be on LinkedIn? And I see that mostly by the way, I am a former, CPA. My wife and I, we call ourselves recovering accountants. I went that route. I was a CPA. I worked for Price Waterhouse, and then into some other smaller accounting firms, into industry, went back into public accounting, and then left to start my own valuation practice. I find CPAs much more resistant to change than people with finance backgrounds, let's say, that didn't work in a CPA firm. But the other aspect that I want to bring in, Trevor, unfortunately, is age. I'm hoping I can say this on your show, but I find that the business valuation profession today is still run by a bunch of old white guys. That's the part that I wasn't sure how everybody would react to. But those old white guys still have particular ways of, that they think the business should be done. Just as an example, one-to-one networking, in-person networking. That's the way you bring in new business. And that's what they tell the younger people. And they don't encourage LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. Whereas the younger people, I don't want to say they don't want to work as hard in a pejorative way, because frankly, I'm 68 and I never wanted to work that hard as some of my compatriots did as we were going up through the ranks. But the younger people seem to be much more open to, hey, we should specialize in a practice area or industry niche. It's not just what's best for us, it's what's good for the client. We should have a different business model than one-to-one client service, because that's self-limiting. There's only so many hours in the day. We all know that, yet nobody is really open to I don't want to say nobody. Very few people are open to a one-to-many, what I call one-to-many kind of valuation service that they might offer. Whether that is group coaching for exiting business owners, or it is a paid for newsletter that you create one time and you sell to 500 subscribing, readers. Or it's a webinar not to other BV practitioners, but if you do have a specialty, why not do a webinar for gift and estate planning attorneys or M&A attorneys, or to the automobile dealerships that are in your area. So to recap, CPAs, bring that dogma over. This is the way that we've always done it, and this is the way that we'll do it until you carry me out of my office. And then the younger people, who I think are just much more open to a different way of doing things, because it means a different way of life.
Yeah, and I found that with my software founder hat on, selling valuation software to CPAs is harder than the finance professionals, we find. And I think the main reason for that is not so much the dogma and sort of being locked into the pragmatism of how they think they should, how they run all the other aspects of the practice. It's a lot of my pushback is literally they've got this Excel model that it might be 3 generations deep at this point. So the boss's boss created this thing back in the 1970s, back before valuations were even really a thing, and then it's been chipped away at, and there's new rows and columns added, and things locked and unlocked. And every time they do a different business with some different angle, it gets updated. Now we're 3 generations deep. No one remembers how this thing started or what we use it, but we just know this is what we have to do. And it's almost like their security blanket. Is that what I always say to the people I'm mentoring is that valuation is a simulation, not a calculation. And it's so true, because people get stuck in their spreadsheet and they will say, oh, my spreadsheet's done, so my valuation is done. And I'm hearing that, I get that kind of pushback, and I'm saying, but look, would you pay that? And that's when I'm coaching people about cross-examination, being cross-examined. The question I always ask is to say, you're doing a capitalized earnings approach and you get future maintainable earnings or something like that. And I'll say, okay, so you've got future maintainable earnings that you've probably got there by looking backwards and normalizing and getting an EBIT, EBITDA or a cash flow or something and applying weighted average of some kind. So you've got this future maintainable earning calculation. That's how this spreadsheet does it. And I'll say, is that your best guess of the future earnings? Hand on heart, you're under oath. Oh no, that's just how the calculation works. And people literally say that in preparation for court, or I've heard people say things like that in court. What do you mean it's just how the calculation panned out? Who's doing this, your spreadsheet or you? And I think I don't want to get into technical stuff today, but I think it's that mindset. And it's not just CPAs, because finance professionals can have the same thing if they were using. But maybe it's the old white men thing that we're scared because the boss says we have to use this template. My best way to converting those people is to say, let me run that valuation you did through my software, and almost 100% of the time I'll find a catastrophic error. Not a judgment error, not an error of assumption. It's like A plus B did not equal C. Your spreadsheet does not work. You've got cell references that don't actually reference to the right cells, literally that kind of stuff. And I think that's part of the whole process is people, yes, like you're saying, they've got this way of doing things. They've got security blankets of the hourly rates and all, people CPAs want to charge hourly rates. But at the same time, their work is often very loose. If they're doing tax work, what do you typically have? You've got the output the client sees, and it's a bit like the iceberg. That's what the client sees on top, and then you've got all these working papers and these validations and all this. And I'll see people's valuation work, and it's literally there's the spreadsheet, and then at the end they type up a Word doc, and there is almost nothing else. No questionnaire, no information gathering and validation of the data. It's just the spreadsheet's finished. Do the Word doc, I'm done. And are you finding, I don't want to get into the technicals, but let's maybe talk about process. And I'm not here for you to endorse my software or even talk about it at all. I want to talk about how process has evolved since you got into the BV game all those years ago, and now, and not even necessarily about technology, but just about what's expected now. Like in the old days, I'm guessing you could get away with a rough calc because no one really knew what you're doing anyway, and we didn't really have the Pratt books yet and all this common knowledge stuff. You could get away with pretty much anything, but now everyone knows everything. We've got the national standards, which didn't have before. Every professional body's got its own standards. What are you finding that people are still hanging on to those old habits, or things that you think if only you just did this, they'd be not just more technically correct, but they'd get more work out in less time, make more money, more one-to-many? So what's your input on that?
I see a couple of things going on here, Trevor, and it's part of the reason why I got out of doing the business valuations. But the number one thing that I caught when you were talking is appraisers are busy, and they've been really busy for some period of time. And because of the way that we do the work, because our model is broken, because our pricing is suffering, people don't have, I don't think people have the time to really spend the effort on the models that they should, because they have another business valuation that's pushing up right behind them. And I promised this client that they would have a draft report by a certain date. And if I don't finish this one that I'm working on now, that's going to push that one back, and that's the next one. And it's just a domino effect. And so because we keep looking for more clients instead of better clients, because we're not really searching for a way to improve our pricing so that we can make the same amount of revenue with the same or fewer engagements than we did last year, our backs are just against the wall. We're busy. We're trying to get the work out the door, and I think the work product suffers.
Okay.
The second thing is, just today, I saw something on LinkedIn where somebody posted, and this is a United States case, an employee stock option plan. I don't know if you have that in Australia, but the valuation was being questioned by the U.S. Department of Labor. Two experts weighed in. One came up with a value of 33 million, and another one came up with a value of 105 million. And I forget what kind of company it was, but that's not relevant, and that's really not relevant. My point is that following professional standards, exercising professional judgment, allowed two experts to come in with widely disparate results, and that's not uncommon. And I just, I wish we were less art and more science. So those kind of discrepancies, do I think the discrepancy is going to go away? No, but should there be a $72 million difference in value of two opposing experts? I don't think that makes any sense either. And that leads me to the third point that I want to make, because you asked about how things are changing. Up until the last couple of years, it really bothered me that I would be starting off doing my valuation of capitalized cash flow or discounted cash flow by saying, well, we're going to take this risk-free rate, and then we're going to add to that a long horizon equity risk premium that's been calculated from companies that are a bazillion dollars big. And oh, by the way, I've got a $10 million revenue company. It bothers me that we've never found a better way to calculate a cost of capital other than by referencing these incredibly large publicly traded companies. I mean, even if you go down into the US deciles of, the 9th decile, the 10th decile that's in Kroll's Cost of Capital Navigator, they're still much larger than the average company that the average practitioner here is valuing. Look at DLOM. I mean, for years, we were relying on restricted stock studies. And it really was, and then Chris Mercer came out with his quantitative marketability discount model, which I think was a step ahead. And then Hitchner a couple of years ago came out with his DLOM toolkit. But that being said, Trevor, I've never looked at the Finnerty option pricing model, or I forget what the other, but my companies were so small that option pricing models didn't make sense. Looking at leaps didn't make sense. The science part of it is, as much as I would like to move it forward, hasn't really helped our profession. We're still pretty much doing things the way that we used to when I got back into this in 1995.
Yeah, well, I think, coming back to my comment about it's a simulation, not a calculation, I think the underlying problem is the market doesn't use the science. So if you look at the average NASDAQ company that might be trading at 20 to 30 times revenue, pre-profit, right? It takes one hell of a DCF calculation to get anywhere close to what the current share price is, right? And I think this is the issue, again, coming from a CPA background, is we're always thinking, when I'm talking to CPAs, they're thinking what they're calculating is what would be a fair value to pay. Not fair as in the accounting sense, but fair as in what would give me a rate of return commensurate with the risks. And so we can do that, and so we've got the income approach for that, the DCF, capitalised earnings, capitalised cash flow, that kind of stuff. I think where I see, because I'm privy to seeing hundreds of other valuers work. I can't see their work through the software, but they contact me. I give them support. I give them mentoring. And the thing that I'm seeing across the world, a lot in Australia, not as much in the US, which is a credit to the US, is the combining of methods to say, I'm doing a DCF or a capitalised earnings approach, and which in theory doesn't really care about the market, because it cares. Right. Because we've got methods for that. We've got market methods for the market. But people are still tempted to say, well, I've done my, what we'll call a capitalisation future maintainable earnings, a CFME, and call it lots of things. And a lot of people are using EBIT or EBITDA or maybe cash flow, but mostly EBITDA. They shouldn't be. But they're doing that, and then they're coming to the multiples. They've done all the beautiful work to get to the FME, and they've got the multiple. And I would say probably 75% of the court reports I see in Australia, they then go look at data, market data. And this could be a business turning over $1 million, $5 million. They look at public company data, and then they basically, we've got multiples 11, but say for size difference, call it 3.8. Some completely arbitrary leap of faith. And then they bring that into their FME method. And I have to stop them and say, again, this is where we come back to the standards, is to say, well, no, this is an income approach. This is actually about what someone should pay based on rate of returns. And if you've got market data, I do your market approach. But I just get a lot of pushback. This is the, different stages of grief and all that, where they're like, no, you're wrong. And I'm back to the standard. And we're like, no, you can. And I'm surprised, and I don't want to put anyone down that might be listening that's only early in their career, people doing 20 years worth of court work doing FME kind of methods, which are effectively, as we all know, pick up Pratt, Mercer, anything. We all know an FME method is a DCF with shortcuts. We all know that. We've been talking about that for 20 years. But they don't know the difference between a multiple in an FME method versus the multiple in a comparable transaction or a guideline public company method. And I'm talking, like I said, 75% of the reports I see. So I think half the problem is that, and I've done some posts on this on LinkedIn and got some feedback both ways, but I don't think many valuers actually read textbooks. And it's crazy to say that. And I know I probably did my first 200 valuations before I read my first textbook. And so don't look at those. I was doing things like provenance model equals equity value. Just ignore the surplus assets. Who cares? We'll just get them for free if we buy the company. And then we'll do it because that's the way my boss showed me, which is the way his boss showed him. And I went to some little seminar for half a day and paid $500, and that's how they did it too. So it must be how you do it. And then 100, 200 reports later, we pick up textbooks and go, oh my God, what have I done? But I think I'm just finding a lot of the industry, even the people that the lawyers are putting on pedestals, they're still not following even what we've all agreed in national standards. And they've got issues where they've got to be careful they don't just suddenly change and start producing reports with the opposite way they used to do it. Because if they're following your kind of advice and getting repeat work and one-to-many interactions, that kind of stuff, people are going to start seeing that their work is done differently. And I think go back to the old white man cliche, I think I've almost lost hope for a lot of the old white men kind of caricatures, because they've been spouting this stuff and, running seminars and doing these things, doing certain ways, and then being shown that actually it's not the best way, and they can't change that, and they don't necessarily want to tell their staff to change either. But what I do find is that the younger practitioners who might have just had a love for doing this stuff early on and started doing more of it, and hopefully a bit like me, ignored what their boss said after a while, and they are great. They love it. They're good readers. They're good at changing if they see there's better information or a better way of doing stuff. But I think, I'm not saying we give up on the older people, but I think there's a real issue with that. Now, let's just talk about age then, because it's relevant, because we've got probably a lot of younger people on our call. To be honest, not a lot of older people don't listen to podcasts. But what is the age mix in the people that will pay a coach like you to improve their valuation practice?
Okay, so my oldest client right now, I've got two clients that are both on the north side of 70. And I think at the youngest, I've got somebody who is 35. And that I'm okay with that. I mean, that sort of makes sense to me, that it's not going to be somebody in their 20s, because they're still learning. And quite frankly, they probably don't have a practice that's profitable enough to support paying a coach. Not that I think that I'm, really exorbitant or anything like that, but they're going through their career progression, right? They're graduating from college. They're probably going to a CPA firm or getting some kind of experience before moving over into business valuation. And typically I get the people when they are fed up of working in a large firm for whatever reason. I don't mean anything bad against large firms, but mostly personal reasons. I don't want to work that many hours. I want to do something different. I don't want to come into the office that often. And so those are the people that I attract early on, the people that are looking to get out of large firm and start up their own practice, but up until that time have never had to market their work, have never had to sell their work, have only really had to deliver their work in the way that all of the people before them delivered their work.
Okay, so a question about getting the work, because that's what everyone wants to know. And it's hard for me because I'm in this little silo personally where most of my work is court work, and most of that work is as the joint expert. So in Australia, under the family law rules, there's an assumption that you get an expert. We call it a single expert. And if you want to adduce evidence from anybody else, you have to actually get leave off the court to say, we don't like the single expert, here's the reasons why. Well, normally the single experts finish their work and you critique it and you say, here, Your Honour, this is why we think we need a shadow. Then you may or may not get permission to have a shadow, but you don't just have a right to have your own expert. And so in that world there, and I see your posts about building a client base and sort of getting, not giving the client the outcomes they want, but giving the client the service they want and deserve, and you getting referrals that way and that kind of stuff. And I always find it hard because I'm sort of always this independent guy sitting back. I market to the lawyers generally. I even have an issue where, if I'll be on a run where I've done, say, 10 jobs for the same legal firm, and I'm thinking, am I too close to that legal firm? And I'm reading your stuff, and you're saying, get closer. And I'm like, well, I don't want to. And so I try to go do 10 jobs for the other firm too, so they just can't argue about it because I do jobs for everybody. Do 10 jobs for everybody. Let's all have a go. So just speak to the kinds of, does everybody need to go and get relationships with lawyers and take them to lunch and do offer the training and all that kind of networking with the lawyers? Or is there a role for people that are a bit more standoffish that can be the court expert kind of person? Or do you think it doesn't matter that you can do both roles But basically, if someone's looking at they're early in their career and they're going, do I go and do all the court stuff and be that untouchable independent expert, and let's take about sort of morals and goals out of it, just pure financially, or is it better to go and say, you know what, I'm just going to go and target one or two niches. I'm going to be the air conditioning or the construction company expert, and I'm going to go get into their industry and go to their industry organization sort of annual events, and then just be known as the guy that helps them all. If you were to start a practice today and you had the skills and you could do either, how would you go about, so let's say, getting your first $1 million revenue?
So I'm a big believer in specialization. And just to let your audience know that I practice what I preach, that once I got started doing BV, I specialized. I really only did tax purpose valuation. So in the United States, that meant gift, it meant estate, charitable contribution, S corporation elections. So I only ever really did tax purpose valuations, and I only ever did it for manufacturers and distributors. Trevor, I've never done an ESOP. I've never done a valuation in healthcare. I've never done a retail, product or service business, because that wasn't what I liked, what I enjoyed doing. And, back a while, I mentioned I did a stint in industry. And one of the things that I did is I worked for a Fortune 500 specialty steel manufacturer. And I had 4 different jobs in that company over 4 different years. And I pretty much knew everything about I thought I knew everything. I knew a lot about manufacturing and distribution. And so it just turned out, Trevor, that my very first valuation client was a manufacturer. And we're walking through the plant, and I'm talking to them, and the owner stops me and says, "You really understand the lingo. You know about supply chain logistics and manufacturing lineups and all of the costing rates." And a light bulb went off for me, because I liked manufacturing and distribution. There was just a crap ton of those kinds of companies that are still around in the 90s. And I just fell into that niche, but it kept me from having to be a jack of all trades, master at none. But my advice, so I just wanted everybody to know that I'm a big believer in specialization, but I don't think specialization happens before generalization, because you need to know, what is the kind of work that I like doing, and who are the kind of clients that I like serving. And once you know the answers to those 2 questions, I think a niche just presents itself. And just to be really clear, specialization, niching doesn't mean it is the only thing that you do. It is the thing that you are known for. So, for example, did I ever take a divorce case, when I was doing my tax purpose valuations for manufacturing distribution? Yes, I did. I didn't particularly enjoy them, but I did, because the attorneys were also giving me the really, the manufacturers that I wanted to value. And so you couldn't just cherry pick. But even niching, even specialization, it doesn't mean that it's going to be the only thing that you ever do from now until Timbuktu. It's just what you're known for. But then gradually, Trevor, as you get known for something, it does become all that you do. And trust me, I was really happy to be doing nothing but tax purpose valuations for manufacturers and distributors, because it meant that I really only had to know one practice area cold and one industry vertical cold.
Okay.
And I referred all of the other work that was not tax purpose or manufacturers and distributors to other people. Now, how do you get to $1 million? Well, generalization, specialization is just going to, I think, create the revenue that you're looking for in your practice, because you're going to enjoy doing this work so much. You're going to live it, you're going to breathe it, you're going to talk about it, you're going to, do speeches, you're going to write articles, and you're going to get a reputation, that reputation for being known for doing X. And as more people find that out, they're actually going to start coming to you. It's sort of like a reverse marketing, in the beginning, it's all outbound, it's LinkedIn, it's cold calls, but eventually, as you get well known, the people are going to hear about you from all of your prior appearances, and that marketing takes care of itself.
Well, to me, it reinforces what you said about abundance versus scarcity, because if you're a scarcity mindset, you're going to try to take everything that's going, which you do when you start, and you've got to pay off your credit cards and your mortgage, so you do what you got to do. And we've all been through that. CPAs went through that when they did their tax practices at the start. We just took everything on, then you spend the rest of your career trying to get rid of the people that you shouldn't have taken on because they repeat work. But having that abundance thing, that's again with the software, people were initially confused why a business valuer would create a tool that other valuers can use to make their practice better. And they thought, what's the catch? What are you trying to steal our data? What are you trying to do? Like still find out who our clients are? And I've looked at it and said, like a simple abundance example that I would have, and probably it's just turned out we've got a lot of forensic accountants in the software, but we've also got a lot of CPA kind of people that a little bit more than dabblers, but they don't do a lot of valuations. And what I've found is that, and I just said it off the cuff once on a webinar, is that why don't you've got say 200 business clients that you do tax for. So why don't you just send an email? Because we've learned through the Alan Weiss and all the coaches, there's thousands of coaches to accountants, to CPAs, not for valuers, but for CPAs, thousands of them. There's everywhere you look, you've got to step over them. They're all over the place. And they've got into things like tax planning. Before the end of the year, send an email to your whole client list for $2,000. We can do blah, 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 and restructure if we need to in tax planning. And we've all learned that you just never know who's going to say yes or no. And people just jump up and they give you the money. You do the work. And I said, why don't you treat valuations like that? Why don't we say to all our business clients, hey, and looking at all the marketing tactics, and a lot of them are, you probably employ them yourself. We're talking about, the really short, how do you get a response in an email? Make it really short. So something like, do you want to know what your business is worth? Question mark. Nothing else, no padding, no, and if you do, no, just that signature. And what the feedbacks come back is they do that, and people go, I do. I didn't know you did that. And maybe they didn't do that, might be the first problem. The abundance of work, and the way I look at that is, so look, like you said before, if I help another expert valuer, in Australia right now, we need another 100 expert valuers. We could have another 100 and there still wouldn't be, we still wouldn't run out of work, any of us. Because a lot of the lawyers are not even getting valuers because they can't find anybody, or it's too expensive because there's no competition. They're just working out estimates themselves and negotiating. And if we even ignore that stuff, if we went and said, okay, well, the pie's so big, we're fighting over it. But if we said, every business in Australia, US, New Zealand, Canada, they all want to know what the business is worth, right? But the CPAs aren't offering it as a service, typically, right? So no one knows the CPA can do it. No one's offering it to them. You're not stealing anybody's work if you're just offering it to your own clients. But what's been missing is the confidence, because they'll hear someone like me speak. Part of the problem, part of my onboarding for the valuation software is running technical training. It's a confidence, booster. Like you know a little bit, he learn the rest, and maybe now you're confident to do valuations, and hey, you might use our software to do it. Why not? But what you're finding, sometimes that technical stuff scares them off, because we talk about, as soon as I talk about weighted average cost capital, I've lost 3/4 of the room because they're like, oh, I sort of remember that from college, but I don't want to actually have to do it. And I'll show an example. Here's how you do it. It's like 5 steps. It's not that hard. Do your CAPM, work at your weighting. You're basically done. And they're like, oh, I can see myself doing that. But I think that's the barrier. And it's also, I don't know I don't think this is a question, but I'm just explaining sort of that abundancy issue. Is I think the abundance is there. You don't have to be doing the court work. Everybody wants to know what the business is worth. Not everyone wants to spend $20,000 to find out. So maybe there's a way you can do it for $5,000 or less, a cheaper version. But the work is there, and there's no reason that's. But that's the feedback I've been getting. When people ask, they say, yes, can you do it? How much? And then you just got to have a process. And I think what's missing is we don't have traditionally, when I talk to other firms about the workflow process, and I've spoken to you basically, like, how do you quote? What happens when the quote converts? Like, do you have a list of your quotes that are out there? Do you like more than just a spreadsheet? Like, do you have some kind of CRM? Do you follow your quotes up? Do you give people options in that? And how do you get the information? Most valuers I still see don't have a questionnaire. How do you get the information? Your job is to simulate the buying. Well, you wouldn't buy the business without learning stuff about it. I've seen, again, court valuers in Australia charging $15,000 plus. Value small businesses, no questionnaire, ask for basically 3 years financial statements and tax returns and produce a report. And it just blows the mind. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting stuck. Like, what would I need to ask for? So we've built a questionnaire, which is basically my questionnaire I've built over 20 years, and just kept adding to it and end up with 90 questions. It's basically due diligence. All the things that every time I'm like, I wish I had this on this job, I'll put on the questionnaire. And in some cases it's way too much, but it allows me to sit back and do that simulation and say, okay, what the hell am I valuing here? What would I be getting myself into if I bought into this business? And I think then that helps that mindset of, okay, so again, people are stuck on the calculation. Oh, I don't know what multiple to use. I don't understand WACC properly. I better just not start. And I'll say to them, but buyers and sellers don't know either. And all you're doing is simulating that process. If you've got data, you don't really need that stuff anyway. You're just doing a simple numerator denominator exercise. If you want to do WACC or you want to, normalize your cash flows and all that kind of stuff, you can do that too. But there's no exact science to it. So it's this fear of, I can't see the whole path and I'm going to make mistakes so I don't start. But on the flip side, which is interesting, I didn't expect this feedback, is a lot of our heavy duty software users who are good valuers, love the software, use it for all their jobs. I've had 3 of them tap me on the shoulder and say, can you stop selling the software? Because they like it so much. They don't want me to be talking to CPAs. And I don't know if you've heard that feedback about myself or anybody else's from existing valuers, is that they see, I had a webinar where I had 200 accountants, non-valuers, 200 accountants on a webinar to learn how to value businesses, right? My other valuers who are proper valuers saw that and went, oh, what are you doing? Because they have this scarcity mindset. So when you have a group's kind of atmosphere with your coaching, are you finding that, because people are a bit guarded, do you think, and I take it back to something we talked about before we started recording, in the software development industry, which I've had to get heavily into to continue my valuation software journey, everybody shares everything, warts and all. Even at the big companies, everybody shares everything, good and bad, and everyone's just, there's so much open source software. Most software that everyone uses now is freely available, and there's 50 maintainers that all maintain it for free and help each other, and it's just, everything is just so nice to deal with and everyone's helping each other. I just don't find that. I find firms shielding themselves against other firms. I find people within firms shielding themselves against other people in those firms and their own little silos competing to win work against each other. Do you see the same thing? Do you think it's a problem? What can we do about it as an industry to just get over ourselves and have that abundance mentality and go, actually, if we all just do well, we'll all make enough money, more money than we'll ever need. We don't have to worry about fighting, because that's creating these silos and it's creating that misinformation where we all think the other guy's got better multiples than we've got. But they don't. They're just doing the same thing. They've got the same problems we've got. What's your input on that?
Well, so my focus is just, I agree with what you're saying, I understand what you're saying, and I see it just a little bit differently in that a lot of this comes down to pricing. Like I've got to do X number of engagements a year at an average price to get the money that I need to make this all work and worthwhile. And so one of my coaching frameworks talks about, it's very easy to describe the obvious value that you have, that you bring to the table. So, again, in the United States, we do a lot of gift and estate planning work. We think what makes us different is if we say, oh, well, I'll give you a report that is in compliance with professional standards, that will withstand the scrutiny of the Internal Revenue Service, that will comply with professional standards. And it's kind of like, well, I should hope so. If that's all if that is what you think makes you different, that's what the last 5 appraisers that I talked to told me that they would be providing as well. And so what I like to tell my people is, so that's the obvious value. What is the hidden or unexpected value that you'll get from working with me? And if you don't have a hidden or an unexpected value of your end product, that thing that you're delivering, whether it be a dollar amount or even emotional relief of getting helping this to get your divorce behind you, you're going to fall into commodity pricing. Because how much am I going to pay in the United States for 2024, you can gift $18,000 to somebody tax-free, but the implicit tax is 40%. So 40% of $18,000 is $7,200. So the maximum that anybody could theoretically save is $7,200. Why would I pay more than that to have you value my business? I might as well just, make it a taxable gift, or not even do the gift if you're going to, because it's actually a negative ROI. If I have to pay you $10,000 for $7,200 worth of tax savings. And very much in the compliance world, Trevor, the things like purchase price allocations. And again, I'm not sure if you have that in
we do.
Australia. These are things that auditors or attorneys are telling their clients, you have to get this done. Nobody likes to have to do anything. And so they want to pay the least possible price to, paper that file with your valuation report, regardless of whether it's coming from your bespoke Word and Excel models or your valuation software. Right out of the box, we never talk about the hidden or unexpected value that you might get from working with me.
Okay. So just on pricing, just a quick comment about hourly rate versus fixed price. What would you be your 2-minute sort of spiel to a new client that you find doing hourly rate religiously and writing off a lot of those hours too, mind you? What is your 2-minute pitch to them to maybe change the behavior?
Well, something that I just wrote today on LinkedIn, the interesting thing to me is that a client is not paying you for how long it takes you to do something. They just want the end result. They're actually paying for their time. So to avoid doing what it is that you can do right the first time, faster than they can. And so to take it out of the BV world, just as an example, you want your house painted. You can certainly paint your freaking house. You have the competence to do that. But do you want to blow an entire week or weekend? Do you want to have to repaint it because you didn't know, how to apply the paint correctly with the roller? No. So the whole hourly rate thing just blows my mind. And I get it in litigation that people say, oh, well, I don't know how long this is going to take. Well, my response is, hey, Trevor, you're the expert. You've been doing this for freaking years. If you don't know how much it's going to cost me to get to through the different stages of litigation, why am I even working with you? One of my, favorite people, she's been doing litigation work for over 20 years and has never done hourly rate pricing. She figures out, hey, we're going to go through phase 1 and then phase 2. Phase 1 might be the information gathering and preparation of the report, and phase 2 might be mediation or arbitration, and phase 3 will be trial. And based on all of my past experience for this kind of work, I know exactly how much it's going to cost you after we scope out, the details. I know how much it's going to cost you to get a report done. I know how much it's going to take to get through mediation or arbitration. And, I think the mentality is, Trevor, is we need to bring more of a portfolio aspect to our work. So just like VCs don't hit a home run, the 10 bagger that they make offsets the one or, the worthless investments that they make. So in some of your engagements, when you don't do hourly and you quote fixed fees, you're going to make a crap ton of money just because of the way things worked out. And on others, you might lose some money, but you're not going to lose a crap ton of money. But in general, the end of the year, is your firm profitable? Yes, it will be if you have a portfolio mentality. And of course, then there's all the other trite cliches, things like, hey, there's no incentive for me to be efficient if I'm getting paid by the hour, because the more efficient and effective that I am, the fewer hours and the less my revenue is going to be. And, that's just not how that's not how I want to work with a client.
What do you think?
I wrote about this.
What's the mix of percentage of valuers, not necessarily your clients, but valuers that you see doing hourly rate versus doing fixed price? What's the mix?
I'm going to say 99% hourly, and that includes two different components, Trevor. One is the strict, hey, I charge by the hour. right? And the other one is, oh, I think this engagement is going to take me 40 hours and my standard hourly rate is $300 an hour.
Yeah.
So multiply those two out and you get a $12,000 fixed fee.
Yeah.
But it's still based on number of hours and an hourly rate. And, I'm in the process of writing my 348th newsletter about this practice management stuff. And so I've seen a lot of things going on, and there's nothing about hourly pricing that works for me. I've written about it a lot. Like I said, it's just none of it makes sense to me.
My favorite example is I say, I'm your realtor. I'm going to get $1 million for your house. Would you like me to sell it and give you that money today or in 6 months? And you would say, well, no, the sooner you get that result for me, the better. And then I'll say to people, well, do you want to incentivize me to take longer to get this report done for you? And so I think when you say it that way, they go, oh, okay, I get it. Because I'll say, if I'm having a slow month, guess who's going to get the time in my timesheets? You are, because I need to get the bills. I need to get the bills up for much. You don't want to give me that temptation, and you want it back as quick as possible. And in my own practice, it's always 100% paid in advance as well. So they have to commit and pay, and that way I actually find that. Sure, go.
Two things I don't want to. I want to mention. Number one, when you go back to the hourly rates, Trevor, to me, there's no hard data that says this is the right hourly rate. We only have anecdotal evidence that so-and-so over in this firm, they're charging $300 an hour, and I've got more or less experience than them, so I'm going to adjust my rate accordingly. Or I'm in Class A office space, and so my hourly rate needs to compensate for my Class A rent or the Mercedes-Benz that I'm driving. What about, hey, everybody, I'm in a small town, Bisbee, Arizona. I'm 7 miles from the Mexican border. The cost of living here is incredibly cheap. I get a job in LA or New York or Philadelphia or Chicago. Do I base my hourly rate on what it needs to be here in Bisbee, Arizona, or what the going rate is in Chicago or Philadelphia or New York or LA? So to me, hourly rates are they're just made up numbers. Hey, Trevor, you and I, we've been through everything together. But one of the things I've noticed, Trevor, about you is you have this incredible self-confidence, self-esteem, whereas I do not. And because you feel so confident and have such self-esteem, you're charging $400 an hour. Because I don't feel that great about myself, I'm charging $300 an hour. But in no way, shape, or form does it mean that your work is better than mine because you're charging $400 an hour and my work is worse than yours because I'm only charging $300 an hour. So, I feel like we've touched on that. You get the idea. I'm not a fan. But remember I said 99% are doing hourly pricing of some form. That other 1%, we're starting to see some traction with value pricing. And so, value pricing is based on a conversation that you have with the client. And, my 3 questions that, and you'll see this a lot in value pricing conversations. Why are you picking me? Oh, well, you were just, you were in the beginning of the alphabet of the NACFA expert member directory. Or, no, my attorney said, hey, if you want to solve this problem, you need Rod. Well, when they tell me that gives me some information. Then the second question is, why do you even need this? How urgent is it? Is the trial in 30 days or is the estate tax return due in 6 months? So that gives me a little bit of information about how urgent this matter is. And then the third question I ask is, how do we need to do this? Which I would like to touch on just real quick. Why do we need this, what I call a zebra report, Trevor? Black text, white background, 200 pages long, no charts, no graphs, no color, no white space. Why don't can we do this as a calculation? Better yet, can we do it as a PowerPoint style report? And even better yet, can we do this as an oral report? Because to me, what's more valuable, Trevor? I give you this report. You tell me that oh, you're thinking of admitting a partner into your firm and you want to know what the buy-in should be. Do I give you a 100-page report that you have absolutely zero time to read and digest? You're looking at the front page, here's the number, Rod's an expert, this must be it. Or, that same report conveyed as an oral report on a Zoom call where I walk you through just the valuation schedules, and really educate you about what I did, which is more valuable to the client.
Or
I know
most brings up another point that I don't see enough valuers doing that extra service after releasing. Let's say they've done a report, they're not offering to have a Zoom or a face-to-face with the board. And I think that is a missed opportunity, because by that point they know, like, and trust you, presumably, unless they think the report's terrible. And they want to, and it's always the thing, they go, oh, you've got enterprise value and goodwill and equity value and value of this particular stock, but they don't know what to do with that. They still need someone to hold their hand. The lawyer doesn't know what to do with it. I've found that in my own practice has been a very rewarding way to then offer that, whether it's just I'm charging enough, I'll do that bit for free, or whether I see that as a way of getting some extra services out of that client. And because that's when you start seeing, like, they don't understand my report. But they won't say that. But if you're there in the room with them, you see they don't understand it, so you learn what really mattered in the report, and you can emphasize it. And I find you get more referrals, you get more satisfaction. But again, we've got these CPAs, we're picking on the CPAs sitting in their office. They don't like to see clients. They just like to get stuff and email it out and be done on it, because they've got the 20 to go in the background. They're just worrying about the next one. I think there's just a missed opportunity to go and turn that into another. And a lot of valuers can be in that conversation about how to grow your business and consult with clients, all that kind of stuff. We just don't see a lot of that because everyone's so busy. So I don't want to take up all your time today, Rod. Do you want to spend a little bit more time, or just summarize another 5 minutes of what you want to get out today?
Yeah. Well, let me just finish your thought and saying, again, that follow-up work that, to me, that might be part of the hidden or unexpected value that you get from me, that I will walk you through the report. But again, I think practitioners are just so freaking busy that they don't have the time. I know in the very beginning of my practice, I left a lot of money on the table because I had this huge backlog of gift and estate tax work to do, and I didn't have time to sit down with the client and say, and oh, by the way, I offer this value improvement consulting service. I noticed these things when I was, doing the valuation. I can help you improve the value if you would like to work with me. I know that there would have been clients that would have said yes to that and would have paid me an exorbitant amount of money to help them improve the value, but it never occurred to me because all I kept thinking was, I got this backlog of compliance reports that I got to get out.
Yeah. Is there anything else you just want to sort of top tips or anything that you just think epiphany starters that you can share with us?
Yeah. I mean, again, before we started recording, my whole thing is that I want to help practitioners turn the practice that they have into the practice that they want. What they have now is all of the legacy stuff, all of the dogma stuff that's weighing them down. Things that I mentioned before, like, pricing the service instead of the client, generalization versus specialization, a one-to-one only client service business model. Those are just examples. Most of my clients are looking for some combination of time, money, and freedom, and that's the practice that they want. I don't judge what it is that somebody wants to do, but if they tell me this is what I want, I will help them get there. Okay.
And so how would people contact you? What would that onboarding look like? Do they get some kind of free taste of what you've got to offer before they have to jump in and spend money?
Oh, sure.
What is that sort of because it's just hard, because a lot of people, they would not even think, because there aren't a lot of coaches to valuers. They wouldn't understand. They know about coaches to accountants, and they just go on about the same Alan Weiss stuff over and over. Might as well just buy Alan's book. But what do you bring different that they wouldn't necessarily expect, and what's the onboarding process feel like?
Well, the free and easy stuff is I post on LinkedIn generally 6 days a week, and it's always something about building, growing, or scaling a practice. My website is rodburkert.com, and that is an easy way to sign up for my newsletter. Like I said, I have published a newsletter every week or every other week since July of 2015, and I'm now on issue 348.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to my free newsletter via the website, again, rodburkert.com. The typical onboarding process, Trevor, is you and I would have a 20-minute, what I call a fit call. I'm not trying to sell you. I just want to find out why you're calling me, why you're reaching out. Do you have a problem that I can help you with? If I can, I will want to work with you. If I can't, I will tell you, I will try and point you in a different, better direction. And if going back, if I can help you, we will then follow up with a strategy session where you're going to go into more detail about your practice, your niche, your pricing, your revenue goals. And if you, we'll talk about that, we'll formulate a plan on that call. So you leave that call with an action plan that you can execute in 90 days. If you want my help with that, you become a coaching client. If not, I'm not going anywhere. And most people come back when they realize, hey, I've got the plan, but I can't figure out how to implement.
Yeah, fantastic. Just so everyone knows, this isn't a paid ad. This is just an honest conversation.
Right.
We've paid nothing
Yes.
to say that. And I just love and again, with CPAs, I've had this kind of coaching and other industries, but I think it's just really good for my audience to go, actually, there are value specific things you need to be thinking about. And the market is changing, your industry is changing. And even if your boss doesn't want to change, maybe you should be changing. Maybe you should be starting your own practice one day. And just there's an abundance out there. Just have that abundance mindset. It's just something that we will never build a black box algorithm to solve. People are trying, and they're always terrible because valuation is in the eyes of the beholder, and the facts are never known. The future's never known. And if you enjoy that kind of work and you have the abundance mentality, you get as much work as you like. And maybe having someone like Rod, or just at least checking him out on LinkedIn and his newsletters. His newsletters are great, lots of detail. And it's just, again, that water cooler. Maybe you don't have those people around you. It's just surround yourself with voices like mine and Rob's and other people that you trust, and then but don't just do nothing. Then get out and then do it. Don't spend all your time listening to us either. So thanks for your time today, Rod. Really appreciate it. Probably have you back, and we'll go deep on some specific sort of deep dives, maybe some case studies of some client success stories, that kind of stuff. That's what I'd want to know, is like, okay, you take people's money, do you make them any better at valuing or making money? Like, I would love to go through that if you've got some examples. And
I would love to be a guest for that. Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Trevor.